Well, hey, friends, welcome to another conversation with the Wonder of Tolkien. My name is Christopher, and I have a really fun conversation planned today. I'm excited to introduce our next guest. He's an author, a lover of myth and stories, and I would say a certified Tolkien nerd and scholar. Tom, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Christopher. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Yes, yeah. I just was just telling Tom earlier, I get the privilege of having these conversations with people who have studied Tolkien and read Tolkien way longer, sometimes longer than I've been alive, which is not dating you, Tom. That's just showing your wisdom. Uh, uh, so we're going to talk about your wonderful book. If you don't have this, I'm going to put a link in our conversation, Pity, Power, and Tolkien's Ring. You definitely want to grab that. But I will share more of that in the later half of our interview. I would love for you just to introduce yourself and for our audience, tell us, how did you stumble into the world of Middle Earth?
Well, it was it's a fun story for me to think of because when I was a little kid, uh, I loved anything that had to do with mythology or ancient history. Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Egyptian mythology, King Arthur, the Middle Ages, all that stuff. I was if it was about that, I wanted to read it.
Hmm.
And that led me uh, to starting to read Conan the Barbarian stories, okay, which were being republished at that time in the late 60s and the early 70s for the first time since they'd appeared in print in the 30s.
Oh, okay.
And so I discovered these books with these crazy, very well done, but kind of crazy Frank Frazetta covers, which were very eye catching, especially for a little boy. So I started reading Conan the Barbarian, and then a comic book version of Conan the Barbarian came out, and I started reading the comic book. And in those days, I don't know if they still do this. In those days, comic books, Marvel comic books anyway, had letters to the editor columns, and he would write it, and then, like Stan Lee would actually, maybe something, write back to you, or and I
Amazing.
and public, and so there, I'm in this one issue of Conan the Barbarian, and I'm reading the letters to the editor, and uh, someone's writing in, and they say, and they're talking about, an earlier issue of the comic book, and they say, oh, the battle scene in such and such an issue was better than any battle scene I've ever seen. I've ever read since the siege of Gondor in the Lord of the Rings. And I'm like, what? What's that? Lord of the Rings? What's that? Siege of Gondor? I'm interested. And I
Oh, I
went,
love it.
and then at some point, not long after that, I went looking for the books, and I found them, on an old, mass market spinner rack at a local newspaper store, and I bought the first one, and then I loved it immediately, and I bought the second one, uh, and then I got to the end of the second one, and it's ended. Frodo was alive but taken by the enemy, and I was like, what? And I jumped on my bike and rode back to the store, hoping that they would still have the third volume there,
Oh,
and they
gosh.
did, and I read it, and I was just, completely taken with the world. I mean, and really with pretty much every aspect of the world. I mean, even like the of course, the battle stuff and Aragorn, and but also, I just loved the stuff with the hobbits.
Hmm.
I loved the way they were always joking and teasing each other and insulting each other, and stuff like that. And I got a big kick out of that. And so from that point on, I read it probably 2 to 3 times a year, for like the next 10 years, you know. And I'm sure I made many a girlfriend in high school miserable by like wanting to talk about Ents, and things like that, rather than what they were talking about. But uh, at least Ents were, well behaved. So it was, and then I went into kind of like a darker period in my life in my 20s, and I stopped reading it
Okay.
completely.
Wow.
And it was funny because I was in the middle of reading it when I stopped, and I was in Moria, which was like a perfectly fitting place to stop if you're in a dark place. I like
Mm-hmm.
to think I was in the chamber of Mizarble, at Balin's tomb, but
Yes.
I think I'm imagining that. But I was in Moria, and I
Mm.
stopped, and I didn't read it again for at least a dozen years. And I had by that time I had kind of by the end of my 20s I had come out of that kind of dark period, and I had always I hadn't stopped loving Tolkien in the meantime. I hadn't stopped remembering him fondly, and as well as other books I'd read. And then now so in my early 30s I started thinking about reading it again. But there was another book I was thinking about. I had loved when I was in high school, and then I had read a lot, and I had gone back and reread that, and I hated it. And I didn't want that to
Whoa.
happen with Tolkien
Hmm.
because my memory of it was so fond that I was afraid that I would go back and read it
Yeah.
and go, wow, this really isn't very good. As I had with the other book, and it would be and the memory of it would be spoiled. So I didn't. So I kind of held off for a number of years, and because I was afraid of that. And then I heard about that they were going to be making movies. And so I started hearing about the movies, and I was reading about the movies, and I said, well, I'll take the chance. I'll take the chance. I mean, I don't really think that I'm going to just think they're bad. Uh, but I was concerned. But anyway, I said, I'll take the chance. And I started reading it again. And it was like I'd never left, and,
Oh
and it was
man.
just I found it just as much fun and just as interesting and just as thoughtful as I ever had. And, since then I've been, rereading it and rereading it and rereading it. And, I don't know how many times I've read it at this point. I mean, I'm sure I probably somewhere over 50, but like I rarely ever. I mean, there's always a copy of it opened somewhere in my
Ah.
house, either a physical copy or on my tablet or whatever. So I'm always looking at something in it, if not actually, reading it from beginning to end. So
Wow. Beautiful.
and so that's pretty much the story of that as far as I can remember. I would like to tell you that I picked up reading it exactly where I had stopped, you know, whatever it was, 13, 14 years earlier. But that's not true. That's not true. I started at the beginning.
You started
Uh,
fresh.
so anyway, one of the things I did that I hadn't done in the earlier phase of my reading Tolkien was I started doing things like I'm going to pay attention to one particular character, special attention to one particular character each time I go through.
Wow.
And so one time I would pay particular attention to what Mary said and what Mary did. Another time it would be Sam. Another time it would be Strider. You know, and you see things that way. That you learn things about the individual characters that way that you don't necessarily learn otherwise.
Wow.
Because some characters like Legolas, who is of course incredibly prominent in the movies, surfing down steps and elephants trunks and things like that. But he's really kind of more. He's this presence who doesn't say very much,
That's
and
true.
obviously he's a great shot and a great warrior, but he's really kind of Gimli. I mean, unless he's interacting with Gimli,
Mm-hmm.
there's really not a whole lot of Legolas. And so to like really pay close attention to what he does say, I mean, I think the only like conversation he has with actual conversation he has with hobbits is the one where you were talking about it with Verlin, where they're in the boat on the river and they're talking about about time, and and that's really is big conversation there, except when he and Gimli are trading barbs,
Yes.
or how many orcs have we killed today,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Wow. Yeah, that is I love the way I love hearing people's stories because the way they get to Tolkien is very odd sometimes. It's not like they plan to say, this is an amazing book, I'm just going to pick it up because everyone's reading it.
Mm,
The kind of route to that. Uh, but I have found very few people who have picked it up and put it back down. They just
mhm.
stuck with it. And so I would love to know what, maybe for you or just in general, what do you think it is about these stories that either resonated with you so much or just resonates with people in general to make it the kind of cult following that it has in this day?
Um, I think one of the things that's most powerful about it is uh, the friendships that are in it.
Hmm.
I think that's very powerful because, you know, uh, that's something most of us, almost all of us, crave in our lives, just to have, meaningful relationships with other people, friendships, and stuff like that. And that's incredibly prominent from the very beginning, from the very beginning. Um, and so that's I think part of it is that those friendships, the way that people get along, characters interact with each other, excuse me, is very is very prominent and very powerful, right from the start.
Yeah.
Um, Also, I think it's about, you see, there's a lot of stuff in there, that you may not even realize, at first, about how. I mean, I don't know that I realized it when I was a kid, but about how, um, about how the world is, you
Yeah.
know, and I don't just mean how Middle Earth is, but I mean how the world is, how the world has got, good and bad, and happiness and suffering, and all these different things in it, and humor as well, and all these different things in there, that make it, like life. Um, I think of another series of books that I've read a lot, very different. There's a series of books, it's like about 20 different books on, about a British naval captain during the Napoleonic Wars, and a friend of his who, if you've ever seen the movie Master and Commander, this
Hmm.
is uh, this is the books that lie behind that.
Okay. Wow.
And one of the most powerful and prominent things in there is the friendship between these two men, and how it goes through its ups and its downs, and and things like that. And it's the two books, they couldn't be more unlike each other. The Lord of the Rings, and these the Sea Stories by Patrick O'Brien, but that's the same. The friendship and the love
Yeah.
between the characters.
Hmm.
And how they work their ways through a life that sometimes can be quite difficult,
Yeah.
is something I think that appeals to people, and I think that pulls people in.
Yes.
And I'm sure there are other things I would think of at another moment, but those are the things that come to my mind first.
Yeah. That's beautiful. This is a off topic, but still on topic question. Do you think I would love to know from your perception, Sam's relationship with Frodo is more servant to master, or is there an element of friendship in that as well?
Well, it certainly starts out as master servant. Um, but masters, and there's a master and a servant in those types of situations can be friends, but it's a very different type of friendship,
Mm.
because, see, we don't really think in America, because we don't have classes in that same sense. Frodo is like is a gentleman. Bilbo is a gentleman. Gentleman means they don't have to work for a living. Means that they have enough money whether it's because they've got jewels buried in the hallway or because they own other land that people farm and pay them rent on.
Yeah.
But so and Sam is on his hands and knees in the dirt every day digging.
Mm,
But the two of them have it's hard for us to think of a friendship between people who aren't equals
that's
socially,
true.
and that's where you start with. I knew a friend years ago who whose mother was from Germany. And as you probably know, other languages like German, like French, like Spanish, in those languages, unless you are really, really, it used to be at any rate, unless you are really, really intimate with someone, you don't refer to them with you. There's a formal version
Yeah.
of you that you use that's polite.
Mm.
And you do that with strangers. You do that with people of other places. And this friend of mine told me her mother had a friend, and they had been friends for life, but they were from different classes. And so they always used that polite form to each other,
Wow.
you know? And some of that is I think what you see, what's going on with Frodo
Hmm.
and Sam. And
Hmm.
and the others in Sam too.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I always like to point out is excuse me, when they get to Bree and they introduce themselves, it's Mr. Underhill, Mr. Took, Mr. Brandybuck, and Sam Gamgee.
Whoa. Never noticed that.
He's not Mr. Okay. And without saying that he's not in the same, without saying he's my servant, he's just said
Yeah.
he's my servant. And those little kind of details. But Sam goes through this thing where he ends up master in the house in which he had been a servant in the beginning. And
Whoa.
yes, of course, he and Frodo. So there is this friendship between them. There is this familiarity between them. But it's always Mr. Frodo.
Mm. Yeah.
The number of times Sam just says Frodo, there are very few.
Wow.
It's always Mr. Frodo.
Hmm.
Uh, and when he says, as he often does, well, begging your pardon, sir, but this is Sam saying, okay, I'm gonna say something I shouldn't be saying to you because you're my
Yes.
boss.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
With all
it's
the
it's like
prefacing.
in yeah, it's like in these TV shows you see where the people were in the military, right? And the major is going to tell the general they're full of it, and they always begin with all due respect, sir, which
Yeah.
means I'm about to be completely disrespectful to you. And I really don't think that people get away with saying anything they want by prefacing
Yes.
it with that in the military, but maybe they do. I don't know. I'm not. I haven't been in the military, but there are levels to it. I mean, when
Yeah.
that we're not always that are hard to pick up at first,
Mm. Mm.
especially if especially if you're an American and you don't come from a society that thinks of that there are different classes.
Yeah.
Or at least traditionally hasn't thought that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there is a great degree of friendship, and there's a great
Mm.
friendship. There's a great affection there, and they are fiercely loyal to one another. And Sam should be loyal to his master, and the master owes the servant loyalty as well. It goes
Mm.
both ways.
Mm.
I mean, even there's a point where I think it's when they're in Ithilien, where maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's in Ithilien where Frodo is thinking about Gollum, and he realizes that the servant has a claim on the master, you know, as the other way around, So,
Mm.
um,
Wow.
it's a complex relationship,
Yes.
and it's interesting because come to think of it, I don't know that Gollum ever calls him anything but master.
That's true.
You know, I mean, you know, when addressing him,
Mhm.
you know, he doesn't call him Mr. Frodo or Master Frodo or Master Baggins or anything like that. It's always just Master. But there's the ring is involved in that too, you know.
Yes.
So that kind of changes things a bit,
Wow.
you know.
Wow. That's beautiful. Yeah, and I think you're right on the friendship piece is so beautiful, and people want that, and they can relate to it, and they want to hear it, they want to see it because they long for it, and everyone's longing for something like that. Um, okay, let's get to your book. I have so many quotes and questions, and I don't know how to put it otherwise. This book, Pity, Power, and Tolkien's Ring, the way you wrote it, so I have to be very honest. I am not a Tolkien scholar. I have a number of books behind me that I've read, some of them that look pretty that I haven't read that I'm intending to read. This is one that I have read, and I am amazed. I was amazed at the depth by which you took apart this story. Um, and I just want to bring up a quote. I had it later in page 24. You said, if we probe the myth too far and too analytically like a scientist rather than a poet, we shall miss something critical that must instead be felt and spoken of in metaphors. And you know, that whole quote of if you try to understand something by breaking it, I think that was beautiful in a sense. You did such a good job at teasing out the theme of power and the lust for power and the control and pity, and yet you did it in a way that didn't break the story down and make it just a number of dots and facts. It moved me through the story, and I would say it was very analytical, but in a sense beautiful, because you tied it to real life. And so I just so
Yes.
appreciate the work you did here, because
Thank you.
I have highlights and underlinings in places where I just thought I wouldn't have in a Tolkien book. And so that's the kind of book I'm looking for, is a book that helps me understand the story, but also I want it to impact my life. I don't want to just have head knowledge. And so you did that so well. And so I would love to know, just, I know you had some of these chapters and ideas in your blog
Mhm.
already, but what made it come to the point where you're like, I need to write a book on this now and not just
Mhm.
blogs? What was the starting point?
Well, you know, I don't remember the exact moment what I said. Okay, I'm going to write a book on this, but you know, it had long been clear to me that there was a book to be written,
Yeah.
not necessarily by me, but that this subject, you know, kind of needed to be explored. And you know, it had started out, you know, with the scene on the stairs with Gollum, and how, you know, in that moment, you know, the reader suddenly is in the place of Bilbo in The Hobbit, looking at Gollum, okay, and pitying him, regardless of how repulsive he is, of how monstrous he has become, and considering that all the way through, the book has, you know, done its level best to make Gollum a frightening, revolting,
Yeah.
evil character who crawls
Mhm.
through windows and steals babies from cradles and eats them, and would gladly eat the hobbits, you know, if at least Stan thinks so, if he had the chance. I mean, he was certainly, that was the whole bit with Bilbo, right? It was like, you know, either if you win, I'll show you out. If I win, I'll eat you. And you know, so even from the first, and so the more I looked at that, you know, the more you know, I became interested you know, in following it up, and the more things I wrote on my blog, the more um, I began to see a larger picture,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and you know, it kind of got to the point where it's like, well, I had a lot of stuff here already, you know, and so you know, I just, at some point, I don't know, I just decided that this was what that this was what I wanted to do, that it would repay the effort, for me at least.
Yeah.
and that it was something I was very, it was a subject I was really interested in understanding better.
Yeah.
And then I came to the point where, you see, sometimes what happens uh, with scholars, okay, and is when we have an idea about something, we pick up a book and we start look in the index and go, okay, what does so and so say about this? And so we kind of, and so they okay this, and they look in another book and they get that, and so they bring together these passages and these
Mm.
ideas from different places, um, and they come up with a picture which has some relationship to the truth usually, but which isn't necessarily complete picture.
Mm.
And so what I was in what I and I decided that I what I needed to do to understand how the ring worked and how pity worked, because I didn't think I could understand the one without understanding the other. I
That's
had to
good.
start at the beginning, and I had to walk to Mordor with Frodo and back and watch how he changes and what it does to him, all the way through there,
Mm.
and because it's easy to pick out, I can pick out pieces from this chapter and that chapter and the other chapter and this, and then put them all together and say the ring does this, but these pieces come from different parts of the story and
Yeah.
from different phases in in the story of how the ring is affecting Frodo.
Mm.
And so I think that can mislead,
Yeah.
you know, and I thought that the only way I was going to understand how the ring affects people was to actually watch it
Mm.
and watch it from the very beginning, and the point, as I make in the book, the very first thing Frodo says is, "Oh, the ring. He left me the ring, huh? That might be useful." And Gandalf's like, "No, no, no," you know. But from the very first, the idea, oh, that might be useful, and
Yeah.
if all it did was make you able to avoid the Sackville Bagginses or other unwelcome callers, that'd be one thing, And as I think I mentioned in the book, in the early drafts, you could use it safely if you were playing a joke,
Mm. Mm.
but Tolkien got rid of that idea fairly quickly.
Yes.
And I think the one remaining bit about using it as a joke is, of course, Bilbo disappearing at the party.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but of course, that's followed by that horrendous argument he has with Gandalf.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and in which I don't think people often, I think people don't always take as seriously as they should. Gandalf took it very seriously. He spent the next 17 years
Cool.
trying to find out about the ring because of
Mm.
what he saw that night. Bilbo backing up against the wall, putting his hand on his sword and saying, "You can't have my ring." And it's just if you don't think
Wild.
that's a threat, you've never been threatened, you know?
Yes. Yes.
And that's where
Wow.
the ring, had taken Bilbo, who had had it for, of course, many years at that point, even though he had only
Yeah.
used it to kind of dodge his relatives,
True.
you know. So
Yeah.
it's a very it had to start at the beginning. Yeah, the story had to start at the beginning and follow itself all the way through,
Yeah.
rather than to just jump around. And when I first submitted it to the press after they had accepted it, and they were like, okay, well, we need. I had very different chapter titles,
Hmm.
you know, and they said, well, we need to change these chapter titles so people can tell by looking at the chapter title what's in the chapter. I'm like, well, okay, but my chapters aren't like thematically based.
Yeah.
It's not like, and so I can't have a chapter that just says,
Mm-hmm.
Frodo in the ring, Aragorn in the ring, Frodo and Gollum, because it doesn't work that way. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
why my chapter titles mostly say from here to there. there to
Yes.
there, because that's the way the book, that's the way the chapters work in them.
Yep.
They're not laid out around any kind of a theme or something. They're on
Yep.
this journey, which sometimes seems to go on and on. But
I love the way you bookended it from the time when he said this may be useful to the time where he's like, I cannot give this up. Like the ring is mine, and you traced it. I'm just curious. I want to ask you more questions about the ring and what you discovered and the pull of power. But just zooming out, as you thought about these themes, was there anything that surprised you as you did more research? Anything that, as you were looking through this lens, you were like, wow, I didn't, because you did a good job connecting this to Tolkien's Legendarium, other writings, outside sources. I mean, you did such a great job even thinking through the religious kind of sacred background that Tolkien brings on. You do a good job not hammering it as the only thing, but not as the thing that doesn't matter. Was there anything that surprised you as you went through this?
everything that surprised me, there were all sorts of things I think along the line that surprised me. Um, I think being, I think realizing that how the scene with Bilbo and Gollum in chapter 5 of The Hobbit, where Bilbo is looking at Gollum and he has the opportunity to kill him, and his first thoughts are, I've got to kill him. He deserves to die. And then it's just like, and then he has that kind of revelation, and he can see how miserable and how wretched Gollum's life is, and spares him. How in so many ways that scene is repeated over and over and over again
Mm,
in different ways throughout the story, and not just in Frodo seeing Gollum, but in the reader seeing Gollum, in
yeah.
Sam seeing Gollum,
Mm,
because on the slopes of Mount Doom, when Frodo goes on and Sam is left with Gollum, he's like, I'll deal with him, Mr. Frodo. And you and the natural expectation is he's gonna kill him.
yep.
And it's like, and good thing too, because he deserves it, you know. But then he doesn't kill him. And he doesn't kill him because he has that moment. He has that moment where, because of all the suffering he's been through, because of all the suffering he's seen Frodo
Mm,
go through, because
beautiful.
of how wretched he's seen Gollum is, because even from the first, when he sees him, he sees he's wretched. He
Mm,
despises him, but he sees that he's wretched, and from carrying the ring himself, even though it was for only a very short time, that he has that moment where now he pities Gollum, and now over and over and over again, that moment, occurs, and
mm,
that was when I realized that, I remember when I realized that was like, ah, okay,
wow.
that's interesting. But there were
Hmm.
there were so many others, I mean,
Mm,
looking at, for example, Galadriel and Boromir, and how he understands him, and he is unnerved by her
mm,
because they both feel the same temptation. They both
whoa.
want to preserve their land. They both want to
Yep.
save their people. And the temptation is, if I had this ring, I could do that. You know, and so Galadriel is a mirror herself.
Mm,
For Boromir, and when he looks in the mirror, he sees himself, and I think that's part of what disturbs him so much,
wow.
and all of that. So moments like the moment when I realized that how critical uh, Frodo's escape from Boromir, how Boromir's attempt to take the ring, and Frodo's escape from Boromir, how critical that is in Frodo when he meets Gollum 3 days later and pities him. because he's
Hmm.
seen what the ring can do. Even
Yes.
someone, as noble and powerful and honorable as Boromir is. Um, you know, because it's really easy when you're reading the book, because you get to the breaking of the Fellowship chapter.
Yep.
Boromir tries to take the ring. Frodo escapes. Frodo goes across the river. And the book ends there. You don't know what's going on with Boromir and the hobbits at that point, or Aragorn or anybody. You just know Frodo and Sam have gone across the river. And then when the next chapter is the departure of Boromir, and you don't see Frodo and Sam
Hmm.
again until book 4. And it's really easy to forget that's only that like the difference between the distance in time between the departure, the breaking of the Fellowship, and the taming of Smeagol is like 3 days.
Wow.
I think you spent several hundred pages reading this wonderful account of the chase across Rohan and Helm's Deep and is Isengard and the Ents and all of that, but it's only a couple of days.
Hmm. Hmm.
And realizing that there was that was a critical element in Frodo, pitying,
Yes.
coming to pity Gollum, as
Wow.
Gandalf had wanted him to do.
Yes. Yeah. I was just thinking as you were talking, the way you wrote this book makes me be in awe of the way Tolkien wrote the story, because I think some of it he stumbled upon because he's a genius and he just connected dots, and some of it was subconsciously but very intentionally done and thought out because of the way he read stories and was so soaked in myth. And so you pull that out really well. Um, I would love to know, just give our audience a brief summary of your understanding of the weight and pull of the ring, because you kind of liken it to the weight and pull of gravity and how it distorts things. And so I would love for you just to tease that
Well,
out a little bit.
the most common explanation that we run into, or metaphor for understanding what the ring does, it originates with Tom Shippey, and it's a really good way of looking at it. And you see that kind of embodied in Peter Jackson, that the ring is like an addiction.
That's good.
Okay, and that's true. And that's true. But I also think that there are things that doesn't explain. You
Hmm.
know, um, and so I thought about it, and it was like, and I guess I kept thinking about, how the ring has more power, has more of an effect on the powerful than it does on the weak.
Mm,
And it's just kind
intriguing.
of, and at one point, I guess I just remembered my high school physics, and I thought, well, oh, it's like gravity. You've got two bodies, and the more massive the bodies are, the more they pull on each other. The more of an effect they have on each other.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of came to this idea
Hmm.
that, and that's why people who never are in the are never anywhere near the ring. Denethor, right, is pulled on by the ring, even though he never gets anywhere
Whoa.
near it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, Saruman, same thing. And so, and also in my way of saying it, I don't believe the ring is conscious. I don't believe the ring is
Hmm.
sitting there thinking, how am I going to get back to the boss? How am I going to get back to Sauron? Or what am I going to tempt Frodo with? I
Mm-hmm.
don't think the ring does that. I don't think the ring is at all conscious. But I think the effect of the ring,
Yeah.
uh, is you feel the ring's power,
Mm.
and feeling that if you have it in your possession, or even if you're thinking about it, you feel the ring's power, and then you start basically unconsciously, subconsciously, whatever you want to say, thinking about what could I do with that power,
Yeah.
and pretty much everybody starts off with, I could save the world. I could, I could end world hunger. Everybody starts out like, like Miss America, with it. And oh, what would you do? Oh, I'd like to do this, and you end up Sauron. You know,
That's your next book, Tom. From Miss America to Sauron.
exactly. From so uh, and it doesn't matter who you are, and because the pull is just like it doesn't matter. Eventually, with gravity, eventually those two things are going to run into each other, because the effect is going to pull them towards each other, unless there are other factors, operating to keep them apart. But and to me, that because I'm thinking if the ring is sentient, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my favorite things, even though I don't agree with it, in the Peter Jackson movies, is when the ring is like, you know,
Yes.
and, the ring would love for if the ring was sentient, it would want to go to Mordor, right? So
Mm.
so it would be tempting for it. Let's go to Mordor, or let's go here. Let's go. It would be Frodo would say, I want to go to Mordor. Ring would be like, let's go. It would be like, Gandalf, I can get, that will be good. Because of course Gandalf, like as Tolkien said, the only person who would have had a chance against Sauron, would have been Gandalf with the ring, which just shows you how powerful Sauron is.
Yeah.
Gandalf with the ring would still almost certainly have lost. And so, and because of course the power of the ring isn't infinite. I mean, even Sauron was in the Second Age, when he had the ring, when he was at the most powerful he ever was, the Númenóreans showed up and Sauron's army said, we're not fighting these guys. And Sauron said, I'm going to take a different approach here. And he surrendered. And all that. So, and of course, even afterwards, like, when the elves and the Númenóreans overthrew Sauron and killed him, that if there's sufficient power, the ring and Sauron can be overthrown. But that kind of power doesn't exist at the end of the Third Age, in the world.
Yeah.
There's no Gil-galad. There's as Elrond says, the power of the elves to resist it was greater. But the elves couldn't do it by themselves, right? Because Sauron had beaten them in the Second Age by themselves. And they didn't have Lúthien and Huan, to kick his butt, and tell him, you're gonna tell me how to get in this tower, or I'm gonna do this to you. He gave up the secret and ran away. So it's the power of the ring, is not insuperable. If you've got enough power. But the thing is that kind of power does not exist within Middle Earth.
Yeah.
It exists in Valinor. It exists with Eru. Okay, but it doesn't exist in, the Valar wouldn't have had any problem taking Sauron down because they were more powerful than he was to begin with.
Yeah.
And the ring, they could have taken the ring away from him. Aule could have unmade the ring, because his craft was greater than Sauron's. His power was greater than Sauron's. But, within Middle Earth, you feel this power, and this power will draw you down. Whether it's, whether it's Sam thinking he's going to be the great hero, and he's going to wave his hand, and the Vale of Gorgoroth is going to burst into flower, and it's going to be like this moment in in The Wizard of Oz, right, when it goes from black and white to color, and that's going to be what happens when Samwise the Strong, hero of the age, waves his hand, and the Vale of Gorgoroth bursts into flower. Is that the world is suddenly going to, become colorful, and the ring, and you want these people, they want these things. Sam wants Sauron to go down. Sam hates the sight of the devastation
Mm-hmm.
and in Mordor. He's a gardener. What else is he going to want to do except
Mm.
see this place green again? And so, and he says, well, with that much power, I could probably do that.
Wow.
And then you just start spiraling inward from that point,
I'm not
and
sure if you
everyone, yeah.
wrote it. Did you write in the book, or did Tolkien write when you said that the ring taps into the innate desire of the wearer or the person?
Uh, I say that, but Tolkien says some things that are much like that. I'm not going to claim that that's my idea, but I think part of the thing that what obscures that is when we talk about the ring is tempting you. Like it's like think in the gospel when Satan takes Christ to the high peak and says, throw
Mm-hmm.
yourself down, God's angels will save you, or bow down and worship me and you'll have all this. It's like it's a person tempting another person.
Mm.
Okay. We talk about the ring like that sometimes when we say the ring tempts Frodo or Gandalf. But I don't see the ring as a person. I don't think the
Mm.
I don't think the evidence supports it. I think I think it's tricky. I think it's a close call. You know, um, but
Mm.
there are so many things that um, that he. There were so many instances where uh, the ring has an ideal opportunity
Yeah.
if it's sentient.
Mm.
And it's not taken up. And it's not taken up. It would love to have Gandalf because it's going to
Mm.
corrupt Gandalf. It would love to
Yes.
have Aragorn because it's going to corrupt Aragorn, even Gandalf.
Wow. Yeah.
So, um, I think it does, because you know, look at the things that Boromir is tempted. Let's just leave it neutral like that. Is tempted. Boromir
Mm.
is tempted by wanting to save his people. By wanting to defeat Sauron, by wanting to preserve Gondor. Galadriel is tempted in the same way for
Yeah.
Lothlorien. You know, they had these desires already.
Yes.
You know, um, Sam is a gardener. His desire is to make things grow and make things bloom. He has that desire already. He has
Mm.
also been crazy about the old stories. For ever since he was a kid. About you know elves fighting Balrogs and stuff like that, and whatever else there in those old stories, and dragons. And so of course, he thinks of himself as Samwise the strong hero of the
Mm.
age, striding across the world of Mordor with a flaming sword and people flocking to his banners, you know, uh,
Wow.
um, Gandalf already has the, the pity and the desire to do good.
Mm.
All of these things are in them already,
Yeah.
you know, but it's when feeling the power of the ring,
Yeah.
sensing the power of the ring, they're
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, maybe I can do this.
That's such a good thought because it makes me think of what James says, how we're not tempted on the outside, we're tempted within, and our desires lead us to that thing. It's like the ring stands for power, and we
Mhm.
have this corrupt nature that wants to do good and to do things, to control, to have healing, and so we see this object of power, we grab onto it. So our desire latches and gets distorted with it. Um, then you're right, because it's not the ring tempting, it's the ring stands for power, but it's your desire latching onto that and distorting that. Um, I would love to move to just your idea of pity, but there's a quote that's kind of stopped me in my tracks when you were writing. It's on page 55. You said, "Yet the healing of spirit that pity may bring is as least as important as saving the world from oppression by Sauron." I'm gonna read that one more time. That's a big statement. Yet the healing of spirit that pity may bring is as at least as important as saving the world from the oppression by Sauron. Could you just unpack that for us? What are you trying to say?
Pity, you know, operates on there are multiple levels of pity. And I talk about this in the book, and you can see this in Gandalf's conversation with Frodo. You know, sometimes Gandalf says pity and he uses a small p. Sometimes he says pity and he uses a big P.
Mm-hmm.
And but Frodo only hears small p's. Okay, he doesn't because he doesn't have a clue what Gandalf's talking about. When he's talking about pity with a large P, any more than when Gandalf says, Bilbo was meant to have the ring and not by its maker, and therefore you were meant to have the ring, and that may be some comfort. And Frodo's like, what? It's not, and I don't know why. I don't understand what you're talking about. Because Frodo doesn't know anything about the Valar or Eru, or I mean, he may be educated enough that he knows knows the name, like Varda or Elbereth or maybe Manwë or something like that, but he doesn't really. They're not really part of his life. They're not part of his existence because there's no religion as such.
Mm-hmm.
In Middle Earth, right? The hobbits don't go to the church or the temple on Saturday or Sunday or Tuesday and pray to Varda. Most of the hobbits have probably never even heard of her. So Frodo has no clue about any of that. And so he doesn't understand what Gandalf is talking about there. But the pity is pity protects Bilbo. Bilbo's pity for Gollum protects him for a very long time from the ring. As I think I said in the book, when if Bilbo had killed Gollum in that moment, he would just have replaced him. He would just have become Gollum. Well, okay. So the pity saves him. It protects him from the ring. And when he does use the ring a couple of times in The Hobbit, he's using it to help get the dwarves out of prison, to try to escape with the Arkenstone, so he can offer it to the men and the elves who are outside Erebor. Okay, he's using it for a good purpose, and so his good purpose at first protects him.
Good.
And Gandalf says that because he began his possession of the ring with pity and mercy, because pity and mercy are two sides of the same coin. Because it's as I say in the book, it comes from Saint Augustine, it comes from Thomas Aquinas, that pity is the thing you feel. Okay, you feel pity in your heart for the suffering of another person, and then you want to help them. And that's the mercy it's talking about. It's not talking about mercy as in the president pardoning you for some crime you've committed. And so there's the and when the two things interact with each other, when you've got pity and the ring, because the ring is designed to rule the fate of many. That's why Sauron made the ring, was to help him conquer the world and control the world. And it was every one of those, one ring to rule them, and it's all about domination. And the pity, on the other hand, pity may also rule the fate of many, and that's the whole kind of dynamic between the two of them. And of course, in the end, the thing that saves Frodo, saves Sam, maybe even you could say saves Gollum, because the Gollum's suffering did come to an end.
Yeah. Yeah. The
You know,
justice and mercy you
whatever
talk
may have
about.
happened in the afterlife to Gollum, it's a different story. But the only way Gollum was ever going to be free of the ring was death.
Yeah.
You know, and so, the ring, pity has this important role to play because of what it does for the person who feels pity and what it does for the person who you feel pity for. And it's as important as defeating Sauron because it's the only available way to
Mm.
defeat Sauron. Because, they made the point several times, even without the ring, Sauron was too powerful. Even if they had the ring, Sauron was too powerful.
Yeah.
There was no way they could win that war,
Mm.
and so the only way was was through pity, because that pity set up all the Bilbo's pity leads to Frodo's pity, leads to Sam's pity, leads to the catastrophe,
Mm.
because they get the ring to the brink. They get the ring to the fire, even if they cannot choose to put it into the fire.
Mm.
And that's where, the catastrophe comes in. That's where the pity with the big P
Yes.
comes in, you know. Um, and also another thing that just stood out for me, in a moment that kind of surprised me, was when I realized that, um, in the scene after the ring has gone into the fire, when Frodo and Sam there on the side of Mount Doom, expecting they're going to die any minute because the mountain is going on, where Frodo says, "I couldn't have done it without God. Let us forgive him."
Mm.
And
Oh,
it's interesting
beautiful.
because Sam doesn't lie. You don't get the answer. I think Sam does, but he doesn't answer. And so there's this, and that is also the last time Gollum is ever mentioned in the book.
Mm.
He's never mentioned. I mean, not counting the appendices, but within the story itself, that's the last time Gollum is ever mentioned. And
Mm.
and when I realized that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so and I've subsequently connect made a connection with that back to the incident on the stairs. You know,
Mm.
uh, so but that's something I'm writing about now, uh, and that's in a sense, that what happens on the stairs is kind of the realization of the answer that Sam doesn't give, of the answer of,
Mm.
yes, Mr. Frodo, let's forgive him, because I think that's why you get to see the stuff you shouldn't be able to see,
Yeah.
because as and the narrator goes out of his way to point out that there's no way that
Mm-hmm.
that what you're seeing when you see Gollum as an old, pitiable thing, that's something no one in the book saw. That he Sam caught a glimpse of it when he first woke up,
Mm-hmm.
but no one in the book saw that. And I think in a way that represents, that functions as, and I'm not necessarily saying Tolkien did this on purpose, because I think all sorts of stuff, when you write a book, all sorts of stuff happens, you know, things you never expected happen. You look back and you read it and you go, gee, I don't remember putting that in there. In some ways, a writer, is where kind of there's a problem with the idea of intent, the author's intent,
Mm.
because writers will often look back at what they've written, and Tolkien does, and realize that they put things in there that they never thought about. Like when Tolkien says, "I never realized it was that much about death." You know, and so an author knows what he intends to put in, but that's not all the author puts in. You
Wow,
know,
beautiful.
and so in some ways, authors are kind of the worst possible interpreters of their own work because all they know was that they what they meant it to mean.
Yeah.
And it can often, and especially if it's good, it can mean so much more than
Mm,
what they consciously meant it to mean. You
yes.
know, so it's in a way, I think that that glimpse we get
Yes.
of Gollum as as an old withered pitiable thing
Mm,
uh, uh, is Gollum's forgiveness. Is that's the that plays the role. Like I said, I'm not saying Tolkien necessarily put it
hmm
there for that reason, or that Frodo put it there for that reason. If we want to, stick with the in world narrator of the story,
hmm
but it's a I think that it worked, it intended or not, it it functions that way.
Yeah. 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 You,
Because I mean that's why we what it's one of the that's why when Sam you know wakes up and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" and and completely alienates Gollum. That's why when we've been sitting there feeling sorry for Gollum, and then all of a sudden Sam wakes up and ruins the moment. And it's
mm,
like the one moment in the book where you go, "Oh, Sam," and Tolkien did too. Tolkien did too when he looked at that moment.
mhm.
He realized Sam really screwed up there. I but considering the situation, the last time Sam had seen Gollum reaching out to touch Frodo had been
Yes.
when he'd overheard the slinker stinker conversation,
hmm
you know, and was pretending to be asleep. Never trust Sam is actually asleep, because so anyway, but he was like, and he would every time uh Slinker would be talking, the hands would come back. And every time Stinker was talking, the hands would start reaching for Frodo. And so,
Mm,
well, this is the last time, you know, Sam has seen something like this. And so he wakes up, he sees Gollum doing this. Gollum has been up to no good, you know?
true.
So it's not like he's innocent, you know? And and so Sam is right to be suspicious of it.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, it uh it has both fortunate and unfortunate, you know, uh consequences.
Yes.
Because unfortunate in that it prevents the possibility Gollum turns away from any possibility of change, of healing, of cure, of redemption, of whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, it allows Gollum to be to take the ring from Frodo and fall and slip and fall by chance, if chance you call it, into the fire, you know? And so the worst possible thing that could have happened
Mm,
is the very thing that has to, is the very best thing that could have happened.
wow.
Because, only in that way could the ring have been, could the ring have been destroyed.
Yeah.
It's a very different, it's a very different scenario, I know when I remember getting to that point in reading the book, and when Frodo says, "I choose the ring is mine. I choose not to do what I have come here to do. The ring is mine." I remember gasping, "Oh no!" You know, "Oh no!" Tolkien says, the clues are there all along, and they are,
True.
and they are. But I was 11. So so I didn't quite pick up on everything like I did later on. But he was right. It was. He couldn't even throw it into the fireplace,
Ah, yes.
which wasn't gonna even make it warm in Bag End. Of course he's not going to be able to throw it into the fire,
Hmm.
you know? And that shows you how much of a power the ring has over him already,
Yeah.
in Bag End. Who knows
Mhm.
how much he actually used it in those years? How many times did he dodge the Sackville Bagginses or somebody else? We don't know that. The only suggestion that he used it is when Galadriel says, "You've only put it on 3 times since you've known what it was."
Yeah.
Well, that seems like maybe she's aware that she's allowing, at least for the possibility, that he did put it on other times before that,
Mm,
you know? And, I would be surprised if he didn't, not that he was like using it to sneak off and steal Farmer Maggot's mushrooms, you know, or things like that, but that he was using it the same way Bilbo used it,
yeah.
but we don't know. We
Yeah.
don't. There's no testimony
Yeah.
in the Lord of the Rings as it is saying that it was used that way. There is in one of the drafts. Speaking of Farmer Maggot, there is when they're at Maggot's house. Uh, Frodo actually has the ring on, and he is invisible, and he pours a pint of ale over Maggot's head. It's a joke, right? Using and so, well, yeah, that's there he is. So I don't see any reason why I should think that he never used it for anything ever, even if it
Yes.
wasn't, you know, pouring drinks over people's heads.
Um, you end the book really beautifully. I mean, your last chapter is worth its weight in gold in buying the book anyway. So I would encourage everyone to read that. But just a couple more questions. You end the book and you talk about chapter 9. There's a difference between mercy and capital M mercy. Earthly pity could not accomplish the destruction of the ring, but they were repaid in capital P pity and mercy. And I just love the way I appreciate the way you ended because you talked about how it was not just Bilbo's pity, but Frodo's pity and Sam's pity all together. The cumulative effect of that did this, but still Providence had to come in and do something that they couldn't even do with their own. And so I love the way you tie that together. But like I said earlier, one of the reasons why I love this book is not just because it makes me appreciate the story more. I mean, I'm reading through it, the Lord of the Rings for the third time. I'm only on my third reading. And so I finished this, but what I'm going to do is put this next to my book as I read it and just track along with it so I can see. I think it'll be so beautiful. But it connects to our lives. And so in our time and age, especially in this recent season in America, there's division, there's cynicism, there's reason to be cynical. There's a lot of uh, darkness and this bad news and a lot of beautiful things happening. How do you connect the stories that you read and write about? Like, what are some lessons, or maybe a lesson that you think we need to just pay attention to in our cultural moment from Tolkien's work?
Hmm. One of the things that you see throughout the book is all these different groups of people running into each other who don't know anything about each other. The hobbits don't know, like the remark about, beyond the borders of of the Shire on Hobbit maps was just blank space. You know, uh, they thought of the Shire as theirs,
Yep.
and they wanted to keep everybody out, especially, they like big people and stuff like that. And so they have this very kind of parochial, small view of the world, and it gets even smaller because the people in in Bywater and Hobbiton look at the people from Buckland as weird,
Hmm.
you know, or the people from other parts of the Shire is weird, and vice versa. When
Yeah.
you run into Farmer Maggot, he's going like, "You should have stayed in Buckland, Mister Frodo. Instead of going off the Hobbiton there where people are weird, you know." And so you've got that, and then you get one, when what this wonderful moment where the morning after uh they meet the Frodo and Sam and Pippin meet the elves, and Gildor and all of that. And the first time we find out that Sam was only pretending to be asleep, Frodo is talking to Sam. He goes, well, what do you think of the elves now, Sam? Now that you've met them, and Sam's like, they're basically they're different. You know, he says they're different. They're a bit above my likes and dislikes.
Hmm.
And so Sam's, you know, Sam has gone mentally now farther than he had ever gone before.
Yeah.
Even though he thought about he'd always like kind of been, oh, elves, sir, before, and like the day before that or whatever it was, he had gotten to the point where, if I take one more step, I'll be farther away from home than I ever have been, and while he's even farther away from home, when he meets the elves,
Wow.
but he still has to learn lessons. He doesn't trust the big people. He doesn't trust the people in Bree. He's like, well, no, why would we stay at the inn? Can't we go find some hobbits? Some proper people. I mean, granted, they're from Bree, but they're still hobbits. And so you have things like that. Then you have things like where the men of Rohan, hobbits are fairy tales to them.
True.
And so are elves, fairy tales to them. They're right next door to Lothlorien, and they have absolutely no connection with it. And all they can think of is that white lady, that sorceress who's inside it, and they completely misunderstand her. And the elves in Lothlorien don't know anything about the outside world either. I mean, Galadriel does, and Celeborn does, and a few others do, but most of the elves in there have never left. So they're just as insulated and just as unaware of the people in the outside world, and just as untrusting of them,
Wow.
as the Rohirrim are of the elves. And the hobbits, as far as the Rohirrim are concerned, they're just fairy tale creatures who disappear in a blink of the eye and live in holes in the ground. Tell us they don't really exist. And the same thing, even when Pippin gets to Gondor, and he is the other in Gondor, as they say. The people of Gondor look at him and they're like, oh, look at him, he's a prince of the halflings, he's probably as close to a prince of the halflings as you could get, since he's the son of the Took, and is going to be the Took himself one day. But but so you've got all of these people who look at each other the way the men of Bree, the people in Bree, look at the Rangers. Oh, stick it not, Strider. Well, they could tell good stories, but you don't want to trust them. They come and go, and nobody knows what they're up to, and so you've got all these different groups of people who don't know about each other, don't trust each other. The elf and the dwarf thing, that's kind of the most obvious because that gets played up a lot, you know. Um, but and we have the same thing. We have all different groups of people in this world, all different types of people in this world. Different religions, different races, different countries, different colors, different this, different that, different the other thing. You know, um, and we need to get over that. You know, I mean, you can believe, for example, that your religion is right without thinking other religions should be stamped out.
That's right.
You know, because like even in like an ecumenical thing, because you hear about these things like oh well, the Pope gets together, with rabbis from Israel and with imams, and it's like there are critical and these three religions share a number of things,
Hmm.
but there are other things which they don't share. To Christians, Jesus is the Messiah. To Jews, he's not. To Muslims, he's a prophet. And those lines are pretty firm. As for what the Christians believe is right and what the Jews believe is right and what the Muslims believe
Yeah,
is right. Well, and we don't have to hate each other
that's right.
because we think differently. We don't have to hate each other because you think it's this way and I think it's that way. We don't have to kill each other for that. You know, uh, and we need to get over that because focusing on divisions between us, focusing on looking at differences between us, and saying those people are different. Those people are dangerous. They're not like us. Um, Never leads to anything good.
Yeah.
It never leads to anything good. And I think when we see the people in Middle Earth, in the Lord of the Rings, overcoming those differences, in response to a common threat, even if they don't necessarily agree with each other on everything, uh, I think that's a powerful lesson, that we can have because there's you know, I live in New York. I grew up in New York. Okay. The so-called melting pot, right? And I grew up surrounded by people of different races, different religions, different this, different that, different the other thing, different languages. Um, and I'm really glad that I did that. That was my experience. Um, because it showed me, that everybody wants basically the same thing. We want a roof over our heads. We want
Mm.
comfort. We want food on our table. We want our children to grow up safe and have a better life than we had. We all want that, regardless of
Yeah.
what color we are or what race we are, what religion we are. Everybody wants that. And growing up in the middle of dozens of languages and people who were Irish American, German American, Italian American, Puerto Ricans, African American, this, that, the other kind of American, Chinese Americans. It's like Americans, you know, uh, and humans, all human beings.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's I think that's an important lesson is that, well, you might as well sell, oh well, they're dwarvish Americans, they're elvish Americans, they're hobbitish Americans. you know um One of my, one many years ago, I went to the wedding of a friend, and she was getting married at City Hall in New York. And lots of people, get married at City Hall in New York, but it's more than just kind of like, going to pay your traffic. People go there, and again, I'm standing there in this hallway because they've got like their kind of, I don't want to call it a chapel because it's not a chapel, but they've got their room where the ceremony is
Mm.
performed, and everybody's kind of waiting their turn, and I'm sitting there on this line, and the line goes all the way down the hallway, and you have got people of every different ethnic group on that line, in every different kind of ethnic wedding attire, in speaking all different
Mm.
languages.
Beautiful.
And I'm standing there and I'm looking up and down this line and I'm like, this is what this is good. This is the way it's supposed to be. We're focusing on what's important. We're focusing on what's the same about us, and we're also focusing on what's different about us. But we're celebrating what's different about us. Nobody was standing on that line going, going to, what kind of stupid outfit do you have on? Even if it looks stupid to them, and there are all sorts of different kinds of wedding outfits in this world, and all different clothing, and you don't have to understand it. You don't have to like it. It just is, you know. I don't have to understand why someone else believes differently than I do. I don't have to understand why they are differently inclined sexually than I am. They start. I don't need to understand it because it's okay. Right. Leave people alone. Let them be. I mean, as long as they're not harming anyone. And 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 everybody would say the same thing about the people in their own group. If my neighbor, whatever he is, whatever she is harming someone, that's a different story. But I think that's one of the things you see, in the Lord of the Rings, is that you see this disadvantage, that the problems that arise from everybody looking at each other sideways, suspiciously, like what those elves are. Can't trust those elves. We all turn into Ted Sandyman, and Bill Fernie, and orcs. We all turn into orcs, and even the orcs. So one of my favorite parts of the whole book is the Shagrat and Gorbak's conversation, where the orcs get humanized in a sense, so it's just a very interesting thing that's there, and Tolkien really painted himself into a corner with the orcs, that he never found a way out of, so there's a lesson there, right?
Wow.
But anyway, that's one of the things I think is most important, as well as some of the things I mentioned at first about the important about friendship and and loyalty and camaraderie and all those things. The importance of home, and one of the things, if you think about it, and I talked about this in the book, is that when they're in Mordor, and when Sam thinks, or actually even anywhere along the line, when Sam thinks of Mordor, or of the Shire, he mentions people. He talks about people. When Frodo thinks about the Shire, it's kind of much more abstract.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the huge difference, and I think that's part of the problem. And I think that's why Frodo ends up on the slopes of Mordor going, "No, Sam, I don't remember the Shire. I remember that it existed. But I can't see it anymore. And I think one of the things that helps protect Sam is that he thinks of the people rather than just the Shire as this idyllic concept. So,
it's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for that. It's a lesson that we need to learn. It's a lesson that we need to learn in this moment, especially. I live in Oakland, California, and it's very diverse. And I wouldn't want to live anywhere else because of it. I get to raise my kids in a place where people look different, act different, talk different, and it's a beautiful thing. I truly believe that everyone is created in God's image, and so they deserve dignity and respect and honor. And yeah, so thank you for that. That's a lesson that we all need to be able to. It's crazy. I think Jesus was kind of right when he said, "Love your neighbor as yourself." Who would have thunk? such a simple lesson would have been so hard, but yet so necessary in this moment. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So thank you for your blog. I'm gonna put a link inside there as well. You have such insightful blogs. Thank you for this book. I'm gonna put a link inside as well. If you don't have this book, please buy it. It will do your mind good, but also I think your soul good as well. So really helpful. And Tom, I'm just delighted that we just able to have this kind of conversation. It's a
Me too.
blessing to me, and yeah, I'm thank you for the work you put in and the kind of stuff you put out because it makes a difference. It might just be a blog or a book, but people are reading it and being impacted by it. And so, um, folks, please check out all of Tom's works. I know he has a book coming up. I know I don't know when it's coming out, but I'm
It'll be a
looking forward
while.
to it. Yeah. Well,
It's gonna
I can't wait.
it's gonna be a while. So I'm in the middle of it. I'm about 200 or so pages in. So I've got
Wow.
about another 200 or so pages to write.
Oh, gosh, that's exciting. Good. Okay. Well, that's gonna be on my pre-order list when I see that come out. So, so grateful for your time, Tom. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Thank you for your
For
insight
having
and
me.
wisdom. Yeah. And folks, this is another conversation on the wonder of Tolkien. We do this because we want to get into Tolkien stories, but also produce the kind of wonder and joy that we need to live in this kind of life. And Tom was right in this kind of day and age where it's a lot of cynicism, a lot of darkness, a lot of division. Let's go pick people that actually love one another well. I think that would make the most difference, and you could do that by starting with the people around you. So, thanks for joining us for another conversation. Hope you have a great week.